Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from AlexMercedCoder.dev, and I want to do another video where I talk specifically more about how to use the network tab of your DevTools. Because it's honestly, when you're working with API calls, it's arguably the most important part of your DevTools for diagnosing a problem. Okay, so right now I have this Express server that I made for the previous video that I just did. Okay, which just has a couple routes, as you can see here. So right now, this request works. So let me just show you like what this does. I click this button, an animation pops up, and in 3 seconds, the API returns the data, which is the word complete. Okay? So now that this API call has happened, I can look it up in my DevTools. So let me just get this out of mobile mode. So if I open up my DevTools, see there's this network tab here. Okay? Super important. This is your best friend whenever you're making API calls and there's a problem. Okay? So now if I take a look at it, let me just refresh the page because you have to have it open before the API call happens. So I hit make request. So you see the API call started. So you see it's pending, okay, and then it finished, okay, and so now it finished. And notice what you see here is always the end of the URL. So you see like the URL is /API. All I see here is API. That's how I know which one it is because the name, the very end of the route should be what you see here as the text. So if I go over here, see highlighter, see it's the very bottom, highlighter.js. And that's, let's see, that's like the URL it's requesting, okay? So now if I click on this, okay, there's a couple different sections. There's headers. This shows me the details of the request. So I can see, okay, hey, my browser made a request to this URL. That's always the first thing I check. Because if there's a problem, it's very likely you made a request to the wrong URL, okay? Because usually in your code, you don't type the full URL. It's usually like dynamically created because you're injecting a variable in a string or something like that. So oftentimes something unexpected happens there, and the actual URL the browser makes a request to is not what you think. So there's that. Checking, hey, is this the right request? Like, you know, maybe I meant to do a post, but I accidentally set it up as a get. So this will tell me that. The status code, okay, 200 generally means good. 300 generally means it's using the cache. So it means, hey, you've done this request before, so I'm just using the cached response. 400 generally means that you made a mistake, so there's something wrong on your end, on the front end. And 500 level means there's something wrong on the back end. Which again, just because you get a 400 for 500 doesn't mean that's necessarily the case. Okay, but that's generally like what it thinks because the way the response happened. Because a 400 error usually comes up when like, hey, the server didn't recognize the URL you requested, so it's telling you, hey, you asked me for something I don't have. So the problem is you're asking for the wrong thing. A 500 happens usually you hit one of the routes on the back end, but an error happened while that route was playing out. So you get back a 500 level error. Okay, so there's that. Here are the headers for the requests. This is only really important if you're expecting certain headers. Like you put in, like if you're using JWT tokens, you probably put like authentication headers. You can see them here. So for what we're doing right now, it's not going to matter. But generally, you may want to look at that. Okay, cool. Now I can go here and I can preview. So here's the raw response. So this is just here on response is just the raw text of the response. And then preview, like if it was HTML, it would show me the HTML page. Since this is JSON, it just shows me the JSON. So I can explore it, okay? So this is a good way for me to see, hey, did I get back what I think I was gonna get back, which I did. Okay, now let's change this to something else. Let's make it where in my front end, instead of actually making the API call to /API like I'm supposed to, maybe I made a typo and I wrote APY, okay? Now let's watch what happens. So I'm gonna refresh the page. I'm gonna hit make request and see, I see a red error here, okay? And see, it's a 404 error. 404 always means not found, meaning the server was like, I don't know what this URL is. So generally when I see that, my first instinct is to check the URL. So I'm going to head over to, so you see here, it's sending back, okay, sending back HTML, okay? So if I go to the response, so you see I'm getting back HTML, and you can always tell because HTML always starts with this like doc type tag, okay? And see I'm getting this 404 not found, okay? So, oh, and then, so I'm looking at it like, okay, this didn't fail. Oh, APY, that's not the right URL. I meant to make a request to API. Okay, so that's one possible problem. Okay, another possible problem, okay, is that you hit the URL, but an error happened. Okay, so you know, different backend frameworks will respond differently. So basically, Express responds with a 404 error. But let's pretend I hit a URL. Let's say I had another URL, app.get slash, let's actually make it APY. Okay, but this URL, rec res, responds with, instead of responding with JSON, it responds with res.send. It responds with some HTML. So h1 hello world. Okay, so it responds with that. So now watch what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my front end code, and I'm going to change this back to APY again. So now it's requesting APY. So let me go here so we don't see the request right now. I hit make request. Okay. And notice like the loader is just kind of happening. And like the request was fine. As you see, I got a 200, meaning the request went by fine. But if I go to my console here, see I get this error here, syntax error, unexpected token, h1 hello world. What happened here, the API call went fine. The API call, like I sent the request, it sent me, and I got back HTML. But I wasn't expecting HTML. So again, if I go back to network and look at that request, APY, and I go to the preview, so I'm getting hello world. And I look here like it's a HTML. Interesting. So what's happening here, if I take a look at the error, it tells me, hey, like unexpected token is not valid JSON. Well, what's happening is that on this line right here, it's trying to parse the response as JSON, but HTML isn't JSON, so you're getting an error. So that's telling me that the API call I just made is not giving me back what I expected, which could be because, you know, if you're using a framework like Django, it's going to give you back these like sort of pages that represent maybe, you know, details about your API or details of your error. So you're hitting that. But the only way to know is to go back and take a look at network and read the response to that particular request. Okay, and then take a look at the headers to see, hey, did I make a request to the right URL? Does everything here look right? Okay, now let's say we try like a different type of request. Like let's make it like a put. Okay, we'll make it a post. Okay, so we'll say cons. Well, this is a post, so method post. And then we're going to include a body. Okay, body, which would be JSON.stringify. We'll just put an object saying, you know, stuff. Yep, doesn't matter what it is. Okay, and then we're going to include some headers, so that way it knows what kind of data it is. So we're going to say, hey, content type. What kind of content are we sending in our request? Again, these are just part of the web standards. Application JSON. Okay, cool. So see, now I'm sending a post request. Now if I go back and let's try this again, I'm going to hit make request. Okay, see, I get a 404. One, because there is no post request for APY. That just doesn't exist in my server. But if I examine this and I take a look at the headers, I see that I did make a post request. Okay, just didn't get the response that I wanted. Okay, but if I scroll down to the bottom, well, usually at the bottom I'd be able to see the body somewhere, but it's not showing it to me right now. I think it usually would show you the body of the response, so when it sends you back data. Why am I not seeing a body? Content type, so I do see the header, application type. Well, usually you would be able to see the contents of the body somewhere around here, but not seeing it at the moment. Maybe because it was unsuccessful. So let me try to do this actually make the route so that way you can see what it looks like when it is successful. So let's just copy this. Okay, and let's make this post. Okay. So now refresh this. I hit make request. See, it was successful this time because now there was a post request on my server. I click on APY. I can read this. Still doesn't show me the body. Weird. Okay. Maybe I'm doing something wrong in that request. Let me just take a look. Body, JSON.stringify, method, headers. Yeah, no, that should be fine. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. Maybe there's something I'm not clicking on over here. But yeah, usually the body would be somewhere in here, but I'm not seeing it. Payload. Oh yeah, well here's payload. So I guess they must have changed it. So now like the body you sent over is here in payload. That's new. I don't remember seeing that before. Okay, so there's the stuff I sent. So if I'm wondering, hey, did I send the thing I expected to send? Because that's another problem. You might have sent the wrong data to the server. So I can see that here and be like, oh, that's what I sent over. That was the body of my request. And again, I can see the response here. These I've never really used. This is more like if you're trying to optimize like the performance. And if you're dealing with cookies, any cookies that were sent back would be listed here. Generally, again, not particularly important unless like you purposely were setting some cookies. So hopefully that gives you a good tour of how to use the network tab to diagnose some very typical errors. Have a great day and enjoy.